So another thing about going to Korea, and this is another thing a lot of the Westerners never understood, because what would happen is, right, a lot of Western players, like even eventually Stefano went there for a while, Thorzin, loads of them did, Ret, TLO, they all went there, but the difference that people don't get is this. They would go for a month, and they would all experience the same thing. And by the way, spoiler, this is why they only went for a month. They'd go for a month, they'd come from the European or NA ladder where they were like top Grandmaster, obviously in all the tournaments, you know. Even if the tournaments had Koreans in, well, they'd have like a few Koreans. And also, it's a weekend tournament. You don't spend a whole week prepping for the match like GSL. So these players would come and they would think, because of the Western tournaments and the Western ladder, like, okay, yeah, maybe Koreans are the best, but I should still be pretty good. And you used to tell me every time you went back, it was like starting at square one again. Like you would start and you'd be terrible the first week. You'd have 40% win rate. And that a lot of these Western players, no joke, their ego was too big. I know a lot of fans wouldn't believe this. They would think you're the ego player. These Western players couldn't handle losing for 2 or 3 weeks. So they would play, usually fail the GSL qualifiers, then just fucking go home and just go and essentially admit, I'll never try to do it and I'll just keep playing these Western tournaments. Like very few people had it's because I want you to explain this. It's hard mentally to do that, right? To make yourself go through the losses.
Of course, if you're like ranked top 10 on EU and then you go to Korea and you're ranked 120 or so, I mean, it's a hard thing to swallow, right? But it's the truth back then. Like I remember in what was the name, MVP. Like I had to work my way up from like rank 170 to like rank 5 until I went to MLG Providence. So I mean, it was always a good indication, you know, of like how good are you. If you can get top 10 on the Korean ladder, you knew you were doing something good. Like, if not strategically, at least like your mechanics were at a really good place. But like you said, like I can't remember all of the Korean non-Korean experiences, but I do know that they were quite low ranked. Except for like, I think Huck was also quite high ranked at some
Yeah,
points.
at one point he had like a round of 8 run as well.
think so.
Yeah. Because that's something, again, people wouldn't understand. It's like that stuff, like you're saying, did correlate. Because the idea is, think about it, right? In a tournament, it depends how good you are on that day. On the ladder, you have to be good every day. And these are the best players in the world, all practicing, and they're all grinding 24/7. So, like, yeah, like, you used to tell me that one of the things you had to do was you'd go there for a few months, level your game up again. Then you'd fly out to go to MLG, to DreamHacks, you go to Europe and America, you'd have the results, you'd get your good results on like top 4, second, third, whatever, and then you'd have to go back, and it's like the time you've been away, your level goes down, and you have to start all over again, right?
Yeah. Because they had so many more good players, you know, so it was just like the development of the game just accelerated in Korea compared to the EU and NA, and like, let's not be delusional either. Like the amount of players just by sheer numbers, and like I would say like the top 100 on Korea were like probably like the top 10 on like EU and NA, if not even more of a gap. Like the gap was really big in the early days of StarCraft. Like the gap shrunk, I think, when like the interest of the game shrunk in Korea as well. I think that's when the gap like started to close a bit.
Yes.
And like when like Sarah and those people like started to win more and more. But before then, the gap was really big, as far as I remember. I don't know. I think it's quite telling that like, if you look at the players that went to Korea and then how they fared later on in StarCraft 2, very few people actually had like a real, what I would consider like a career, I suppose.
Because, I mean, along these lines, this is also something that needs to be explained, which is, as we're explaining with like the issues you had with the Koreans, like there's cool things about Korea, but it definitely wasn't your favourite place to live. Like you'd rather be at home in Sweden, right? You just went there because you really just wanted to be good at StarCraft. You wanted to grind to be the best, right?
Well, I remember the only thing I really cared about was that, to improve in StarCraft. And I think that's like a mentality you kind of have to have, you know. I believe that was the case for a lot of the top players. I definitely didn't like a lot of that. Like, it was really hard at some points. I remember feeling really discouraged. Like, you can't speak the language. There were a lot of places in Korea where like just being a foreigner was like a bad thing. I'm not sure if you experienced that or like
Yeah, a little bit.
heard about that, but like that was definitely a real thing when I was like trying to meet other people in Korea and so on. And, like, if people think we're being bad towards foreigners here in the EU, I really they're in for a rude awakening in that sense.
Sure.
Which was always a good experience, that I have taken into my new, so to say, life. But yeah, I mean, I always enjoyed it. I did always enjoy it because I could play with the best players that had the same mentality as me. Because I felt like when I went back to EU, I couldn't really improve in the game the same way because they weren't like I would compare the average EU or NA player as like a Swiss cheese, like they had so many holes. Like they were good at some things, but they had like so many holes. Whereas the Koreans, they were always really good, because like all the best macro players were in Korea, all the best people at timing attacks were in Korea, all the best new strategies were in Korea. So you're always the best equipped when you have played in Korea.
When you said there that like all you cared about was StarCraft, I'm assuming it's pretty fair to say like your whole like self-esteem was wrapped up in how good you were at StarCraft at any one point in time, right?
Yeah, of course, it's true. It was everything I had. Like it was my identity, Like I was always like really bored with everything in my life until up to that point. Like I barely went to school, gymnasium, and like all this stuff. Like I just enjoyed playing like Warcraft 3 back then. So when StarCraft 2 came out, I was like, oh my god, I'm going to try this one time, like a new game. Perhaps I could like do this for like a long time. Not like a job, but like I wanted to see like how good I could be and so on. And like eventually I got lucky in that sense that like there became a scene. So yeah, definitely it was like I think I had to. I'm not sure what would have happened if I didn't have StarCraft, but I'm glad I did. So yeah, it was a huge part of my life.